Currently 6,000 children, I'll say that again, 6,000 children who are waiting for adoptive parents. They're in care. Scott and his civil partner discussed adopting a few years ago, but they were unsure of how accessible adoption was for same-sex couples. With the help of MK-based Adoptionplus, they found a match and are now parents to a 4-year-old boy. Adoptionplus will continue to support Scott and his family with therapy services for all. We'll chat to Joanne from Adoptionplus a little bit later on. Scott, I want to hear your story first, though. In effect, I've told the bulk of it just in my little introduction there. When did you and your civil partner decide to look at the possibility of adoption?
Well, good afternoon, Nick. I'll say going back probably about 2 years, this is when we first seriously looked at adoption. To be honest, we didn't really know how accessible it was for same-sex couples. And so when we have heard about adoption in the past, we hadn't really given it much more thought. It really come to light that being a very strong, connected couple that we are, family values are really important to us, and we come from two very supportive and inclusive family setups. So when we did a little bit more research, we understood that it was accessible to us, and indeed was a good route to look at for our own family.
Now, I've got 3 children. When I met my wife, we talked about having children quite early on. It was quite clear that she thought she'd found the father of her, although, as time has shown, probably the mother of her. There's 2 mothers in our house, basically, but she knew that she'd found the person she wanted to have children with.
Yes.
And I can say the same for myself. When you met your partner going back the best part of 10 years, were children ever on the menu? At which point did you start to think, you know what, I'd like to be a dad?
Absolutely. I think, obviously, in the last few years, we've had so many changes with civil partnership and equal marriage recently coming in. But going back 10 years ago, those things were still a distant vision, really. So, you know, we've been together for 10 years. I've been civil partner for the last 3. We're both in our early 40s now, so we've shared a lot of life experiences together, and we're really committed in that relationship. I think that's number one. You have to be, as an adoptive parent or any parent, you know, number one, have that stability and structure that you've got between yourself for the possibility of a family coming in. So once again, with that research we did, it come to light that it was an opportunity, so we're delighted that we could look at adoption. Did
you have that sort of double thought moment where you and your partner said, hey, let's adopt, and then, oh, OK, now what?
I mean, to be honest with you, we'd done a lot of research, so we knew adopting a child isn't obviously a fast pace to being a parent. Being a parent, there's a lot of responsibilities that come with that. Obviously, you know that as a dad yourself. So,
and lack of sleep.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, part of our assessment, we've had lots of training to be a parent, if that makes sense. Obviously, a lot of people have children but don't necessarily know how to parent that well, and the right approach you have to have with that nurturing environment with a child. So with our adoption support, we knew that we would need ourselves to find out a lot more about the way an adopted child's perhaps brain works, for example, and if they've suffered neglect or trauma, how we can work with them. So we've really worked with our adoption agency on empowering ourselves with those skill sets, taking that forward.
Was there a moment where you just sat down with your partner and you looked at the kind of parents you wanted to be, you looked at the kind of parents you had, you suggested that you both come from very stable, loving environments, and you actually, for want of a better word, worked out a strategy?
Yes. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we had this long-term vision in mind that we'd go through the adoption process, and I'll talk about that process in a moment. But we are on the long-term journey, as with any parent. You know, what we've had to do is play catch-up with a 4-year-old. He was 3 when he joined us. I mean, thankfully, we've bypassed the nappy stage, which is good for us. But
it has the benefit of they don't answer back.
Well, exactly. So I guess it's a double-edged sword.
It's a very double-edged sword, yeah.
So, you know, with that in mind, we know it's a long-term process, really, so we're committed to doing that as parents going forward.
From the moment that you had both decided you want to become adoptive parents, did you keep it under wraps and try to find your path? Did you turn to your own parents, your own friends? When did it become common knowledge?
Well, I think we've always said, our parents have always said, and our friends have always said to us that we'd make great parents, but until we did that research, we didn't know it was that accessible. So with that in mind, when we discussed it with our family and friends, they were delighted for us and said you'd make great dads. So with that in mind, I guess it gave us some more confidence to go ahead with that. I mean, you know, same-sex adoption, for some people still quite against, you know, same-sex adoption as they are with same-sex marriage as such. But, you know, sexuality is just one of multi-facets that make me as a person. It doesn't define me, but it's just part of me. But I do have very obviously strong family values that I've learnt from my parents, taking that forward. But once we discussed it with our parents and our families, we decided to proceed with it. But we had their support from day one, which was fantastic.
You paint a very positive picture. People around you saying that you'd both make great dads from the day you met, your parents being very supportive. Was there any resistance from any parts of your community, your peers, your work colleagues? Did anybody stop and say, you know what, Scott, you're a really nice guy, but hold on a minute. Is it fair? Is it right? Is it moral to bring a child into a house where there are two fathers? Well,
for us, we've always been open about our sexuality, and we're quite forward-thinking modern parents in a way, in that we... You know, whilst people have their perceptions, no one actually come to us with that point of view. It was the only point of view they came to us with, are you sure? Because you want to adopt, because obviously your lifestyle changes a lot. From being the two money earners coming in with no responsibilities regarding parenting. I mean, we've got a dog, but that's about it. To being parents with a child, there's a lot of responsibility and a lot to discuss in that. So we weren't actually met with any adverse reactions at all, which we were very fortunate to be.
You used a word earlier on, you talked about being empowered and feeling empowered. And I'm quite interested in that angle, actually, because there are two sides to this. There are those parents who consciously decide to have children.
Yes.
I also know people who've consciously decided not to have children, and I respect them hugely because they've decided that they couldn't provide the necessary nurturing and loving environment for the children to come in.
Yes.
Then there's kind of the third group, I'm being a little bit stereotypical, but there's a third group who have children because they feel that's what they're meant to do. And you know, you get married and you kind of feel the weight of society says you'll have children. You're obviously in the first group where you and your partner made a clear decision that you wanted to make that life change and you wanted to make that difference to a child.
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned at the beginning, there are so many children waiting for parents. Regardless of sexuality or our family setup, we've got two effective male role models that can really be effective parents for a child. So regardless of our makeup of family, we're both dedicated adults together to give a child an opportunity to help them regulate and repair any trauma they may have had in the past or neglect, and make them hopefully an independent, very capable young person, in this case a young man, a bit later on in life.
And give them a safe environment, above all, somewhere where they can actually grow and flourish. The process itself, there you are, the two of you decide to adopt. Is it a gruelling process?
Not at all. I think there is a preconceived idea that in the past it has been, and from what I've heard and researched before, yes, I think the process could have taken up to a couple of years. But for us, it was very much a supportive process from Adoptionplus, and we really chose Adoptionplus because even though a lot of people go to local authority, they could offer us long-term support and development for our child, not just for now and during the process, but longer term up until he's 18, which is fantastic. There may not necessarily be issues immediately, but there might be issues, let's say, with adolescence and self-identity that we may need assistance through them a bit later on in life.
But of course the flip side of that is there are issues anyway. I mean, find me a family where a child isn't, causing them all manner of grief. I can speak for myself in that regard, if it's any consolation.
Yeah, and I think for us as well, the difficulty is, not difficulty as such, but something you have to be mindful of is sometimes the behaviour you see, is that age-related or is it due to their past? So you have to be very much a reflective the approach is very reflective on looking back of ways you've handled issues or the way the child has behaved. There may be triggers related to their past.
As my wife said when we took my first child out of hospital, as we left the hospital, she said, look, I'm just going to let you know that one way or another we're going to mess him up. It's just a question of degrees. So then you've got the question of how much of this is us and how much of it is just being children. You have exactly the same questions. So we're talking to Scott here about his adoption journey. He's adopted a little boy who's now 4 years old with his civil partner. We'll find out, what it was was like when they met their new son, and what the ensuing, I knew I was trying to find a word there, Scott, what the ensuing days and months have been like, and how the little boy has settled into their family. It's BBC Three Counties Radio. Here's Brian Wilson. It's God Only Knows. Raj.
Thanks, Nick. Well, in St Neots, the A1 is partly blocked southbound with an accident.
Come across a little bit towards your microphone. There we go. We're talking to Scott about his adoption journey. He's adopted a little boy with his civil partner. You talked very articulately and eloquently about the thought process you went through, that you're a loving, stable, established couple that have very good role models in your parents, and you decided that you both wanted to be dads. So,
yes.
So you got involved in the process, which wasn't quite as gruelling as you'd feared.
Yeah.
At which point did you become aware of who was to become your son?
Well, it took about, first of all, when you go through the adoption process, you go through lots of preparation with your social worker for them to prepare something called a PAR, which is Prospective Adopters Report, and that gets all presented at your approval for adoption panel, and then we were approved in September last year, and then the most exciting part began, the matching process.
You say you have this panel. It sounds quite stressful.
Yeah, I mean, the panel do ask you, obviously they need to verify that you're there for the right reasons and ask you questions about the reasons for adopting and what you can offer a child.
Do you prepare your answers to these questions?
Not at all. I think because you've gone through the process, everything, and you have a desire to be a parent, so there's nothing to catch you out. And obviously the panel really want you to do well in those interviews, that panel interview.
So just to be clear, you were nervous about coming on the radio, but you've done a panel where you've had to give all of your reasons
well,
for...
the panel was about a dozen people, not
yes,
how many
and you're nervous
thousand.
about coming into the studio. I don't get that at all. So,
Yes.
so they then say, OK, you're good to go.
Absolutely, yeah. So once we had that confirmation, literally, we got the go-ahead to start looking at some profiles of children. No, we didn't necessarily have a particular child in mind or even chose the sex of a child. It was more about what we could offer that child. So with our social workers' expertise and them getting to know us, they brought us some profiles to look at that we knew that our approach and style of parenting would match really well with that expectation.
So you're given a folder, in effect, with pictures, and how much of the children's history are you allowed to know?
It's more of an overview, so it doesn't go into lots of detail. It just tells you that, and it's presented as from the child's perspective. My name's etc. I'm so and so age. I like playing with. So it's very much a top level feel of a child, and you get a photo as well.
Why did you go for the little boy that is now your son?
Well, we knew that he had experienced a degree of neglect and trauma. And he'd been in foster care for the last 2 years. He did actually go through the adoption process originally with another couple, but during the initial visits, the couple changed their mind. They dropped out of the process.
That would have been heartbreaking for him.
Absolutely. So not only did our child have obviously the issues about being an adopted child anyway, and his parental issues, there was the potential neglected feel from being rejected from another couple.
But what was it that drew you to him? Was it his history, the fact that he needed that nurturing, safe environment?
Absolutely. He needed somebody, a couple that didn't have any other children, that could give him lots of one-to-one attention and could work through his behavioural issues. Because of the way we are, as a couple, quite nurturing, and the way we parent, it was a good match with our profile and background, with his expectations and his needs.
Anyone listening to this is going to think that you're saints, not because this little boy was in any way beyond help. On the contrary, he's going to have a wonderful, fulfilling life with you. But
yes.
But to opt to become parents and choose a little boy who quite clearly was going to pose you a number of challenges through no fault of his own requires a lot of courage.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think for us, I mean, we were committed from the outset, and we knew that most children in the adoption arena will have some level of trauma and neglect and some behavioural issues or self-identity issues that they'll need help working through with. So we knew that from day one. I think that's a really good point, that people really need to be considerate of that, and that there is a lot of pressure, not pressure on you as such, but you have to be aware that being a parent of an adopted child is going to be not always an easy ride.
Was he made aware from the first instant that he was going to have two dads?
Not at all, no, because we needed to go through the matching process. We have to attend a matching panel. So another panel interview with this particular child in mind. So those questions are more focused around the child's individuality and their needs that we could match. And that happened in November last year.
And at which point was he made aware that he was coming into a household with two dads?
Yeah, it was just into the new year, the first week of the new year, and then a week later we met him for the first time. I went through a 2-week introduction period.
Now, I don't know how emotionally articulate your little boy is. My guess is that he will be quite emotionally articulate because of what he's been through. Has he at any point spoken to you and your partner about his thoughts of coming into a family unit that is slightly different to the one that maybe he would have known previously?
He was just delighted to have a family. That was the main thing. Children want family, that structure and support going forward. At the moment, he's none the wiser that he's got two dads. To him, there's no difference as if he's got a mum and a dad, or just a mum or just a dad. So we haven't had those questions just yet, but we're well prepared to take him through that and explain that later in life when he understands, when it's more appropriate for his age.
Has he had to explain anything at school and around his young peers?
Not at all yet, not yet. I think his friends think it's quite modern and quite different that he's got two dads. But we're bringing him up to think that being different, it's okay. Not everyone's the same. And for us and everyone else, it'd be a very boring life if everybody was the same.
This is very true. How is he doing?
He's doing really, really well. He's settled in amazingly in the last 10, 11 months. From perhaps quite a shy child originally at the beginning to very much a more calm, intuitive child that can express his emotions. And he's just so much fun to be with. He brings us a lot of joy, but he's getting a lot back from us. He needed that structure. So it's going really, really well, especially now he started school. It's
a very virtuous circle, isn't it? Everybody seems to win. Now, when I had my children, obviously you have that immediate sense of love. They come out and they're yours. You immediately connect with them. Did you get that sense from the first day that he came to live with you? Or has there been an element of bonding over a period of time Actually, I'm being slightly disingenuous because with my son, it took me a while to bond. It took me a few months to get my head around it. And in fact, in some ways, with all three of the children. So has there been that period of time for you to develop that love? Because you can have the thought in your head that you love him because you want to nurture him. But where are you at in terms of that real bond as adoptive parents?
Really good point. I think naturally over the last 10 months, we've come a long way. So for us, a little boy joined our family at 3, so we've had lots of information on his background and his history and his personality. So we had lots of homework to do in that research and understanding his past, which gave us an understanding of, I guess, an emotional connection with him, of what he might need and how we could support that. And that's naturally developed over the last year or so he's been with us, coming up to the year. We've developed that relationship, the father-son's relationship. We're very proud of him. We love him to bits. He's a wonderful little boy. I mean, yes, children have their ups and downs, as they normally do.
Surely not.
But overall, we feel a really strong connection and bond with him.
Are you prepared in your heads for the moment where he might want to seek out his true parents?
Absolutely. I think from day one, well, I say from day one, we know from the outset that connection and the parental contact is important. We don't want to hide the fact he's adopted. We want him to know that he's from a different background, yes, but it doesn't make him any less of a person or different in society. So we know that with his original birth parents, we're in the middle of looking at the contact arrangements. If later in life he wishes to pursue that, he certainly can. We have a book to go with him, to go through with him, a later life book, which explains his past in children's terms, so he can access that at a toddler, infant age. And there's a later life letter when he's older, which explains more of an adult level as to why he was placed for adoption. But, going forward, if he wants to know more about his parents in the future, we're happy to have those discussions with him. We're very open about that.
And of course the bottom line is, notwithstanding the whys and the wherefores, the whos and the hows, you've got a little boy who's in a safe house and from what you're saying is flourishing.
Absolutely, yeah, that's the main thing. Yeah.
We're talking to Scott about his journey to adoption. He's adopted with his civil partner, who's adopted a little boy who's now turned 4 and who, I'm delighted to say, seems to be posing him all the same problems that any 4-year-old should pose him. It gets even tougher, Scott. Don't even think. You haven't even started yet. Trust me, wait till they turn 7 and I'm reliably informed that it gets even worse when they become teenagers. Oh, and the other thing is they'll never thank you. just so you know.
I should bear that in mind.
They'll never thank you for all of the work that you've done. We'll catch up with Joanne Alper shortly. She's the Service Director at Adoptionplus.
Shrink Wrapped, every Sunday from 1.
Can we firstly start by talking about what dementia actually is?
Dementia itself is not an illness, but it's more a descriptive umbrella term.
Shrink Wrapped.
He was a pilot prior to this.
He just didn't want to be on his own anywhere, and he wouldn't go out very much.
So once you are diagnosed, what other help is out there for people?
Even sometimes I struggle to find information, and it's just a constant battle for everybody all the time.
Shrink Wrapped, every Sunday from 1 on BBC Three Counties Radio.
This is Nick Coffer on BBC Three Counties Radio.
Scott talking about adopting his little boy, who's now 4 years old. You adopted him with your civil partner. It sounds like he's doing really well. And you're accompanied today by Joanne Alper, who's the Service Director at Adoptionplus. Joanne, in terms of same-sex adoptions, how common is this now?
It's becoming more common. I think in 2008, I think 2.5% of all adoptions in the UK were with same-sex couples. 2013, that's increased to 5.8. I think, so although it's increasing and that's doubled, I think there's still potential for many, many more couples to come forward and consider adopting the children out there who need families.
And it could be a bit of a boon for you, because there are thousands of children in care awaiting adoption. You need all the good parents you can find.
Absolutely. Those children need the good parents. It's unimaginable how awful it must be waiting in foster care, knowing that social workers are trying to find you a forever family where you're going to be able to settle and grow, and then just waiting and think, why has no one come forward for me? Lots of children end up thinking it's their fault, and lots of those children end up not ever getting adoptive families. So if there are people out there who can be great parents to those children, I think it's amazing if they understand and get the confidence to be able to come forward and explore adoption.
When you look at same-sex adopters like Scott and his partner, do they come to you a little bit nervously, a little bit unsure as to whether they can adopt, what their rights are, how you can help them?
I think everyone's different, and some people are more anxious than others, and I think probably it depends how much prejudice people have experienced prior to contacting us. But we are very much a children's service, so it's about the right parents for children, and anyone who's really committed to being a parent and is open to offering their home and their life to helping a child, we are delighted to speak to. So hopefully we give them the confidence and reassurance to know that we're really, really pleased that they've contacted us.
Scott, I'm going to ask you this question in two parts, and yet in effect it's the same question, okay. So bear with me. But someone listening to this who has considered adoption, what would you say to them? And someone who is in a same-sex relationship who has considered adoption, what would you say to them? I guess the answer is going to be the same, but possibly with a slight nuance based on your own experiences.
Yeah, I think for both different sexes of people, it is the same message. If you can provide, if you can provide a safe, structured, nurtured environment to a child, then do seriously consider adoption. From my experience, same-sex couples have had, from my experience, a really good experience going through the journey with Adoptionplus, and I haven't been treated unfavourably or any differently to a regular couple of a man and a female going through the process. For me, the most rewarding thing is hearing the uncontrollable laughter of my child, and there's nothing that's priceless. There's nothing that can match that. So that and knowing that you're making a difference, it makes it all worthwhile. So do consider it, whether you are a same-sex couple or not, or even an individual adopter.
It's that huge shift in values, isn't it, whereby you and your partner were living a fairly simplistic life where you only had yourselves to look after, you were earning your income, you were, I'm not casting aspersions, but probably going on nice holidays and all of those that you're nodding, okay. It's spending good money on nice things. Yes. And now, of course, it's all changed, and it's that huge gear change that you and your partner have gone through.
Yeah, I think that's similarly to anyone that becomes a parent.
Absolutely.
You have to make those adjustments, and you work with those adjustments. It is part of the course, and you take that to reflect upon, but you need to be committed to it to be an effective parent.
There's an information evening tomorrow night, Tuesday the 4th of November at 7 o'clock at the offices of Adoptionplus, which is in Malso, just outside Milton Keynes. If you want more information, you can call them on 01908 218 251 218 and the website is www.adoptionplus.co.uk. Final question for you, Scott.
Yes.
Are you done at number one?
I think so, because of his needs. He needs a family just with him in it at the moment. But never say never. It's been a good process for us, so it's something that we may well consider in the future.
Well, you talk about the similarities of adopting and just being normal birth parents.
Yes.
Trust me, that happens as well. So you have the baby and you swear blind for at least the first year that you're never going to do it again, okay? And then you start to ease a little bit, and then suddenly, 2 years later, you're off again, okay?
Exactly.
So maybe let us know in a year's time whether your partner's view has shifted on that.
Certainly will, Nick.
It's quite normal that once you go through the initial strain and stress, then you think, do you know what? And also, you'll forget what it was like at the beginning.
Absolutely.
That happens. Scott, lovely to have had you in the studio. Joanne, thank you for coming in and talking about the work you do as well. And most importantly, I wish your son all the very, very best in his continuing happy life with you and your partner.
Thank you very much.